our projects, and also would-be contractors in so far as having effective communication is towards implementation of OGS in the country. And therefore, without wasting much of your time, I would like straight to go into the program. Victor earlier on introduced the speakers already. I will not go in those details. I will introduce them as we get to each of the presentations. But first of all, before we go into the three presentations, we have two speakers to first open this webinar. First of all, I will introduce Mr. Justin Kosa, who is Manager in charge of Corporate Affairs at the Rural Electrification Authority, who will speak, after which I will invite Madam Doreen Walia from us, Tough Country Manager, Zambia, who will also speak before we can finally invite our three presenters for the morning. I now invite Mr. Mukosa to give his remarks. Thank you.
A very good morning to all of you who have come to join us on this web seminar with the theme Off-Grid Solar Energy in Zambia, Reality or Fantasy. Now, part of what I wanted to say has already been said by Chole, but perhaps just to say that this is one of the steps in the journey that we started somewhere, I think, in October 2020. Whose purpose was to develop and implement a publicity and information dissemination strategy. This is through a consultancy that has been provided through a technical assistance by Africa Clean Energy, and we are grateful for that. Now, through this process of developing the strategy, I want to acknowledge that a number of benchmarks have already been made. From the time we had the kickoff meeting, I think it was held somewhere around 8th of October last year, to the consultative meetings or consultative engagements that we've been having over the time, to the submission of the inception report, and as well as to the finalization of the draft strategy document. Now, I must say that this webcast is one of the final stages, I think, in the completion of the strategy. And as we are quite very excited and eager to put the strategy into action to achieve the ultimate aim of what we are saying, increasing the uptake of off-grid solar technologies by various stakeholders. Now, let me just take this opportunity to thank all the stakeholders that have participated in this process and that have contributed to making the outcome of this exercise a reality. On behalf of RIA, therefore, I wish to warmly welcome you all to this web seminar and hope that we all have fruitful engagements. I wish to pay a special welcome to our presenters. I know the moderator will introduce them, and also maybe just to thank them for finding space to share their expertise on the role of national policy in achieving national electrification goals. I wish to welcome you all once again and enjoy the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkosa. At this point, we'll invite Madam Doreen Walia, who is a Staff Country Manager, Zambia. Thank you, Doreen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cholwe, and thank you very much, Mr. Mkosa. Welcome everyone to this webinar. It's an exciting webinar, and as a staff, we are very excited to be part of this process. As Mr. Mkosa has said, we have been working with RIA for some time now, and we are happy to actually reach a point where we can actually participate and work together on this webinar. So just talking briefly about the A-Staff program. The A-Staff program, that is the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility, is a 4-year program that is funded by the UK government. And specifically by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, formerly FCDO. We are in 14 countries in Southern, Eastern, and Western Africa, Zambia being one of the countries, of course. So the objective of this program is really to catalyze a market-based approach for private sector delivery of off-grid solar technologies. And our focus is on standalone solar systems. So what we are doing is we have been working closely with the government to address the barriers which preventing the growth of the solar industry. And one of apart from working with government, we have also been working closely with private sector, as well as also other donor initiatives. So for the A-Staff program, we have 3 pillars. The first pillar looks at supporting, creating an enabling environment. In this case, what we are doing is to assist the government to put in place appropriate policies and regulations, support market development activities, and also improve quality standards. The second pillar for the A-Staff is knowledge management. Here we're looking to increase market intelligence of standalone solar success and also help disseminate information around what potential there is for off-grid solar. So we are actually happy to be part of this because this is one of the initiatives which will support the knowledge management pillar. The last pillar looks at coordination. Here we are supporting the government, specifically Ministry of Energy and the Off-Grid Task Force, in ensuring that there is coordination amongst the various initiatives within the sector. So in a nutshell, that is our program, and we have been working in Zambia since last year, around February, when the project was launched. So for this particular webinar, what I hope is at the end of this webinar, it will get a lot of people now talking about the possibility of off-grid solar and what it can actually do for the country in support of the electrification goals. Thank you so much. I can hand back to you, Mr. Cholo.
Thank you very much, Doreen, and welcome once again to those that have just joined us to this webinar, where our topic for discussion this morning is off-grid solar energy in Zambia. Is it a reality or fantasy? To discuss this subject, we have 3 sub-themes, and these sub-themes are as follows. The first presentation is accelerating the achievement of national electrification goals through OGS solutions, ensuring effective policies and an enabling environment. This theme or this subject will be discussed or presented by Mr. Brian Mainza from the Ministry of Energy, Zambia. And the second presentation will be centered around the subject of exploring opportunities for Zambia's electricity challenges through OGS solutions, the role of the private sector in increasing uptake of household OGS technologies. This presentation will be given to us by Mr. Matanda Mwewa, who is from SIAS, and also the final presentation will be presented by Mr. Muntanga Munkombwe from the Rural Electrification Authority, who will give us a subject on promoting consumer awareness on OGS solutions through effective and coordinated communication. Those are the 3 presentations that we're going to have this morning. Therefore, we will go straight into the first presentation, which will be given by Mr. Brian Mainza, but just also to emphasize to the team that you are kindly advised also to put up the questions on the chat section so that it helps us also to look through the questions as they as we are supposed to share to everybody. And after each presentation, we're going to allow 1 question, after which the rest of the questions are going to be discussed at the end. And as a way of ending the program, we're going to invite again Mr. Justin Mukosa, who is going to give us a call to action arising from the discussion. What are the next steps? What is expected out of the discussion that we're going to have this morning? At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Mr. Brian Mainza from Ministry of Energy to discuss accelerating the achievement of national electrification goals through OGS solutions, ensuring effective policies and an enabling environment. Over to you, Mr. Mainza. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rassam. Thank you very much for everyone for the excellent organization. So, as it has been mentioned, my name is Mainza. I'm actually the focal point person for the project, Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility of the Ministry. Yeah, so to begin my presentation, just to look at the presentation outline, I don't know if you can move the slides. Okay, so I'll talk about the overview, first of all. Also, the policy framework, the current status of solar, the project supporting the development of solar energy, future prospects, and then I'll conclude. Okay, so we can go to the next one. Yeah, so the energy scenario in the country. So the main sources of energy in Zambia. So we have biomass, petroleum, coal. So among the renewable energies, solar, wind, thermal, and mini hydro. So petroleum is wholly imported. So biomass is the most used energy source. So it accounts for about 70% of the energy used in Zambia. So it's used in form of wood fuel and charcoal. So we also have agricultural waste and forestry waste that can also be used as an energy source. So the potential for hydro is about 6,000 megawatts. And we also have potential for coal and geothermal. So we are yet to fully explore how much potential we have in these, but of course we have a running coal power plant currently. So the renewable energy, we talk about it in terms of small hydro and solar. Actually, the renewable hydro in itself is renewable, but for the sake of implementation in our country, we put the cap as 20 megawatts going down as renewable because it's less disturbance to the environment. So if you talk about the large hydros, there's more disturbance to the environment, settlement, and so on. So for the sake of just operation, we don't usually regard it as renewable. Okay, so can go to the next one. Okay, so this slide gives more of a summary to a lot of things that I should have spoken about. It talks about generation, consumption, and access to electricity. So in terms of generation, we currently have about 2,981 megawatts total installed capacity. So a bunch of it is large hydropower. As you can see, the pie chart that is down there indicates that solar is only 3%, so we have heavy fuel oil, about 4%, we have got diesel 3%, and coal 10%. So in terms of consumption, much of the consumption is in the mining sector, so that accounts for about 55%. So also about agriculture and forestry, which is about 2%, and other sectors 6%, households about 30%. So a lot of electricity that we actually produce is used in the mining industry. We still have a deficit of about 810 megawatts currently because of the low water levels in major hydro reservoirs. So in terms of access to electricity, so the national access is 31.2%. So the urban is about 67%. The rural is quite low. So in terms of grid, we've got 4.4% grid and 7.4% off grid, and the demand keeps growing at 5%. So these figures are a bit old. I think we're using a document which was published in 2015. They have not been updated yet, but we have some information in certain other documents which we are yet to adopt so that we can update. The rural electrification, of course, in terms of off-grid and grid, has quite advanced. It's just that we do not have the actual figures to talk about, but we know it's much bigger than what we have in this slide. Okay, so we can go to the next one. Okay, so the next slide talks about the institutional arrangement in terms of the electricity sector. So the Minister of Energy, of course, is in charge of policy and it guides the energy sector in the way we want it to go. So now that we have got a bit of challenges in terms of power because of less water in our major reservoirs, we are trying to promote renewable energy and supporting these as other institutions which are implementing agents such as the Energy Regulation Board. Of course, it regulates the energy sector. So ZESCO, which is our utility. We've got Rural Electrification Authority, which looks about the electrification in rural areas, and of course, Minister of Finance. There's a lot that we do with them. We can't access any financing without involving the Minister of Finance. So these institutions are key to the success in the energy sector. So we can go to the next one, which is the current status of solar energy. So we zero in now on solar energy. What really is the situation now? So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I've swapped the slides a bit. Sorry for that. I've brought a slide that talks about the current status of solar energy on slide 6. So it should be slide 9, I think. Is that possible to bring it up? Okay, thank you very much. So the current status of solar energy is that we only have 30% contribution to the national energy mix. So it's quite low. And I think it's important that we are having this discussion to address such kind of issues. So if you look at the utility scale solar that we have 88 megawatts of it. So those are in the M phase. So we do not have any other utility scale. Of course, we have a 1 megawatt in the copper belt and a few other kilowatts, but it's not significant. We say solar energy is really important to the national energy mix. I think we should have been talking about a much bigger number, but of course I'll talk about what we are doing about these low numbers. So there's an increase in solar mini grids being installed. Most of them are in Eastern Province. So the mini grids actually are a very good development, and they've assisted in terms of access to electricity, because the solar home systems being managed by households was a bit of a challenge, especially in terms of replacement of the battery. Most of the solar home systems that we were doing and accounting for the contribution of solar to the national energy mix were being done by either RIA or the ministry, and they were being done in these institutional houses, government schools, and clinics. But most of them had a challenge. When the batteries are no longer working, the issue of replacing them was really a challenge. In our monitoring, activities, we found that the sustainability of the solar home systems was quite difficult, especially for those that we have as government assisted to access that. But the mini grids have really assisted, because these are being managed, people are paying for them, and the replacement of batteries is not necessarily the issue of the person paying, but the company ensures that the replacement is done through those payments from the customer. So this really is a very good thing. Perhaps I can talk about one of the reasons I've observed why the Eastern Province. I think much of it is the kind of settlements that are there. Many people are clustered. They are not very distributed as in other parts of the country. So if you go to villages in Eastern Province, you find people, the houses are quite close to each other. So it's very difficult to have a mini grid there, because you can easily connect them. But in other areas, one house is here, the other house is 100 meters away. So the connection cost becomes very high, and any mini-grid developer would rather be in a place where they can cut costs. And because these people are low, income generating communities, you also want to charge them less. So if you balance it up, you'd rather be in a place where people are clustered. The other reason, I think there's more agriculture in Eastern Province, so people are able to raise some funds to pay for the electricity. That's my observation. I think it's bound to be studied further to see if it's very different from other places, and to ask developers what really is motivating them to go ahead and have these installed Eastern Province, majority of them. So the other thing is that there is increased adoption of solar in rural areas and urban areas. One of the main reasons, of course, was the need for backup systems. So in most urban areas, we are also using solar more now than we used to because of load shedding. So we put these backup systems. At least you can watch a TV if you don't have power from ZESCO. And also in the rural areas, because now a lot of things are being done on the phone. Somebody must have a phone to communicate. How do we deliver? How do we send some Airtel money or MTN money and so on? So they need to have their phones charged. So they must have something to charge with. So they end up buying these small solar kits and use them. And even our interaction with the many solar dealers has indicated that they have some initial. Oh, I think I'm jumping to number 4. Let me go to number 2. So increased cost of electricity. So when the electricity was increased by about 75%, people started looking for options so that they don't really depend entirely on the electricity from ZESCO. So most of the lower hanging fruit was solar kits or backup system. So there's also increased awareness of alternatives for lighting and phone charging, of course. So people are more responsive to the adverts to do solar. They are asking more about the cost and so on. So that's helped increase the adoption. So the last one is the innovative ways in which the solar dealers are conducting their business now. So some of them are giving flexible payment systems because they know the people in the rural areas who might need these are low-paying communities. So if you tell them, no, you pay a 5,000 kwacha upfront, that money might not be available for them. So they have a flexible systems of pay-as-you-go and other facilities that assist them to access. So therefore, there is an increased adoption. That's why I said the 4.4% that we indicate as the rural electrification access now is way too low than what is happening, such that we don't have a figure to govern or to justify that this is what we have. So I think these are that are planned for this year and next year. Okay, so we can go to now. So some of the policies. So Isaiah, I may need to go back to slide 6, I think. It's supposed to be policy framework. No, the projects will come later. So in the policy framework, so we have first of all the national energy policy itself, so which recognizes solar energy as critical to rural electrification. So it is one of the easiest ways to increase access to electricity in rural areas. So also the Rural Electrification Act, which establishes the REA, also was a recognition that we need to go out there and increase access in rural areas. And one of the ways that is mentioned is through solar energy. So we also have fiscal incentives on solar. So we want to make it more affordable by reducing the taxes on it. So we've had the SI 32 and 33 since 2008, but we saw a need to review it because things have changed drastically. There's a lot that we need to do with solar. So there's more for solar drying, the solar for many other uses, for solar water pumping. So the productive use of energy, I think, was not really catered for in the current SIs that we have. So staff has come through so that we can make reviews, make additions, and just relook at the whole SIs and see how we can make them better for the benefit of the rural communities and us in the town. So we also have standard developments. Usually these are done by the Energy Regulation Board and ZABS, the Zambia Bureau of Standards, and they support the development of standards for solar. So these are to ensure that we have quality goods that are coming in the country and people
Mr. Mainza,
are sustainable. So,
Mr. Mainza, hello, Mr. Mainza, just a kind reminder.
Yes, I can get you.
Yeah, just a kind reminder that you have 5 minutes remaining on your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so the standards development is at the center of it. So it's the two institutions. Of course, at the end of the day, we get the means of it. So the next slide. So we also have the national registration strategy. So these are coming up, and the solar. We also have the Electricity Act that the rural electrification. We also have the mini grid regulatory framework that ERB is doing to support the developer of these mini grids by grid encroachment and so on. The national strategy, I think I've mentioned it, so it's under development, and also
Mr. Mainza? Hello, Mr. Mainza. We seem to have a challenge. Hello, Mr. Mainza, are you there?
I think we may have dropped Mr. Mainza.
Yeah, it looks like that. I am also not.
Yeah, we seem to have.
Mr. Moderator, Mr. Kasamu.
Yes, please.
I think Mr. Mainza has. He's just mentioned to me that he's lost connection. He is trying to get back in, though.
All right. Thank you. Maybe we could take this opportunity to just check through the chat section and see the questions that have come through as Mr. Mainza is trying to reconnect. There is a question from Martin that says, thank you, Mr. Mainza. Are there any discussions about plans for mini-grid solar for urbanizing or urban or peri-urban areas? I'm sure this is a question that that we will let Mr. Mainza discuss. Well, he seems to be joining us back. Please let's keep our questions coming. Mr. Mainza, welcome back. We had lost you somewhere. Are you able to kindly just conclude, please?
Okay, thank you so much. So I was talking about some of the activities that we are doing to support solar energy. So I think my second last slide is talking about projects supporting development of solar energy. So we have quite a number. So the African Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility.
Mr. Mainza? Well, I think we have lost Mr. Mainza again. Mr. Mainza, are you able to hear me? All right. I guess at this point, we shall. I'll request that Isaiah, we kindly move to the next presentation so that we can sort out the connection for Mr. Mainza. But at the same time, when we do that, we will also take his questions at the end when he's able to get us.
Okay, please give me also a time for questions. I'm not able to write it down. I'm not able to locate. Maybe I can ask verbally whenever the time comes.
Please, we'll give you the time. We'll give you the time to ask the question at the end, since Mr. Mainza is not with us to respond to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I now want to. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to draw you to the next presentation, which is going to be presented by Mr. Matanda Mwewa from CIAS. The presentation is titled Exploring Opportunities for Zambia's Electricity Challenges Through OGS Solutions, the role of private sector in increasing uptake of household OGS technologies. I now, let's please welcome Mr. Matanda Mwewa with his presentation, after which we'll take one question and then move to the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes, Mr. Matanda. Just make it a slideshow so that we can see the full screen.
No problem. Okay. All right. Let me first of all start by saying energy is central to the growth and prosperity of any economy. Hence, the conversations must continue even in trying times like these. It's very encouraging to see the level of interest by various stakeholders. I commend you all. My name is Matanda Mwewa, the CIAS chairperson. I also have other members joined in on the webinar. Just in case there are questions, they may step in to answer some of those questions. If I may just speak a bit about the association. Basically, the aim of the association is to facilitate the wide-scale use of solar energy in Zambia. That's our overall aim. If I may begin with the slides.
Sorry, Mr. Matanda, the slides are not we seem to be seeing an error on screen. We are not seeing the presentation in full screen mode.
Isaiah?
Let me do this. Let me share for you, and then we can, let's see if we can set this up for you. Isaiah, do you want to share the presentation you have quickly as we try and sort out? Yeah, as we sort out Mr. Matanda.
From my end. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we may go to the next slide. So I'm basically looking at, okay, can you go to the next slide?
Next one.
Yes. Okay, if I may begin, off-grid solar systems basically refer to standalone products, systems, or services that may be provided to individuals or communities. In the recent past, it's been recognized that this sector can play a major role in making a lasting economic, social, and environmental impact around the globe. The off-grid solar industry, as can be seen from what's really happening in the world, is already making positive impacts. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Sorry, I can't see the slide. I'm sorry, I can't see the slide.
Okay, everybody, let's take a minute to just assist these guys here. Can you see the slides, everybody, from my sharing?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can see that.
Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. So we were here. And Mr. Matanda, if you would want to, just go ahead and request for control, and I will give you control so that you control your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I have control?
Yes, now you should be having control of your presentation. Just try and scroll to the right. Just use the right arrow on your keyboard to scroll to the next.
Sorry, there's nothing happening.
It's moving. It's moving. Just go back to where you are, and then you can just control your presentation. There you go. You're all set.
All right, thank you. Let me go to the next slide. Zambia's energy sector overview, as Mr. Brian already noted, obviously we have about 2,800 megawatts of installed electricity generation capacity, which is 85% coming from hydro and the 15% coming from other sources. National access to electricity averages at about 81%, with 67 from the urban and 4.4% from the rural population. When you talk about off-grid solar, just like the rest of Africa, Zambia's largest population is off-grid, and most of them are still using biomass and obviously fossil fuel or fossil energy. The off-grid population represents a sizable amount, market opportunity of solar home systems, solar panels, batteries, solar pumps, etc. So it's moving a bit slow. Off-grid solar solutions or off-grid solar has the potential to play a significant role in the efforts to achieve universal access or universal energy access. Off-grid solar can transform lives or has seen to transform lives and livelihoods of the people, health-wise, equity, and empowerment of women, income-generating activities, and also provides environmental sustainability. There are various initiatives that have been introduced by the international community, governments, as well as the private sector, some of which you all know: sustainable energy for all, power for all, basically with the aim of electrifying non-electrified households by 2030. This transition will require critical thinking, creating an enabling environment through supportive policies, regulatory frameworks, partnerships, and involvement of a broad range of stakeholders like the ones that we have on this webinar. Achieving this by national electricity grids will require enormous investments. I'm sure AREA can attest to this, that they've spent millions and millions on trying to extend the grid. And studies have shown that this cannot be achieved under the business as usual scenario. Hence, we need to do more in order to have universal access for all by 2030. All inputs are needed. Neither the public sector nor the private sector can do this alone or tackle the challenges that are ahead alone. Approaches and initiatives to achieve the energy goals need to be based on partnerships, as we've seen in the past, partnerships like with Gogla, partnership with the off-grid task, the international community, which allow each actor to fully leverage its capacities and comparative advantage. The difficulties of developing a business model to bring affordable energy to these markets are real. I'm sure SIA's members like Sunny Money, Muhanya Solar, as well as Phoenix have seen and can attest to this because they have done some business models that are actually working at the moment right now. We can also say that this is not insurmountable. The markets deserve businesses which are up for the challenge. And as Mr. Brian alluded to earlier, some of these companies have actually brought in pay-as-you-go solar type of activities or initiatives that allow people in the off-grid areas to pay slowly, as we know that they are unable to pay upfront. The question is this a reality or fantasy? The private sector has proven through innovation, product design, that they can penetrate new markets, difficult markets. So it's necessary to channel the know-how and the resources of the private sector into national initiatives, projects, and programs at country level. The reality of this will only be achieved if the demand is realized, supply is there, the policies are in place, and finance is aligned to what needs to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, the future is bright and it can be achieved by having all partners, or should I say cooperating partners, work together to achieve national or to achieve access energy for all. In conclusion, the off-grid solar sector is mostly driven by donors and state-owned, and the state-owned. Government's commitment and acknowledgement to work with the private sector, both local and international, could have a catalytic effect for the development of the market. Just to bring out some of the statistics, we have about 108 million people currently benefiting of improved energy access, and we have about 58.4 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, which was abated due to reduced kerosene use, and an additional $4.2 billion US as income. That was my short presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matanda, Mwewa, for that wonderful presentation. At this point, I'll invite if there is one question, after which we will proceed to the next presentation. And after the last presentation, then we'll go into plenary and get a little more questions. Should I ask from the participants if there's one question that we can take for now before we can move to the next presentation? Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Is it directed to Mr. Matanda or directed to
Yes.
Mr. Sakala?
Yeah, Mr. Matanda.
Thank you.
So-
Please go ahead.
So
Introduce yourself, please.
Okay, I am Prem Jain. I am professor in physics at the University of Zambia. I'm in the solar
Thank
for
you.
the last 40 years. So my
Thank you.
question, a very brief question on the last slide. 108 million people are benefiting. This is the number of people in the whole of Africa or whole of world. Obviously, it is not for Zambia. It is much more than the population. So which this figure refers to?
Okay, thank you for that question. Those figures are globally in the world. Thank you.
Do we have time for one more question from me?
Thank you, Mr. Can we take, Prof, can we take the question at the end, please? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I will introduce Mr. Muntanga Munkombwe, who's the third presenter for this morning. He's going to present on promoting consumer awareness on OGS solutions through effective and coordinated communication. Mr. Muntanga is a renewable energy engineer from the Rural Electrification Authority, Zambia. Over to you, Mr. Muntanga. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasamo, and good morning, participants.
Good morning, Mr. Matanda. And if you want control of your presentation, I would be okay. I can see you have already made the request, so you should be having it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for purposes of our webinar this morning, I will have a slight bias towards the solar home systems, but towards the end, I will delve into the other aspects of off-grid solar. So I think this has already been stated severally about the Rural Electrification Authority, who we are, what we do, and how we go about doing it. I think is pretty much known to a good number of people. But essentially, we were formed by an Act of Parliament of 2003, specifically Act number 20, and we use what is known as the Rural Electrification Master Plan to go out into the identified rural growth centers. The specifics can be availed at any particular point in time should anyone wish to request for them. They can come through to REA for more detail. So in relation to the space, the off-grid space, one of the things that does bring about quite a lot of confusion is, how do you coordinate all these efforts in getting about to achieve the electrification objective? And for this discussion, I will cite the Sustainable Solar Marketing Packages Program that was undertaken by the Rural Electrification Authority, specifically the first phase. So the project covered a total cost of roughly about $3 million, I think $2.6 million to be precise. and it had 3 targeted locations, which was Kalomo in Southern Province, Isoka, now believe that is Northern Muchinga, and Lukulu in Western Province. And the objective there was to have a twofold approach. First, to provide some form of support for the solar home systems, specifically the solar home systems that were implemented in public facilities. So by that we mean schools, the health care centers, and the institutional houses. So the solar home system that was installed at those particular facilities were 600 watt peak in terms of the installed PV array capacity. And they had a 400 ampere hour 24 volt battery bank with an inverter as well. These were the gap that they were built into bridge was quite specific towards meeting the needs of enabling the teachers to prepare things like lesson plans and also have access for them to at least access some IT facilities. And I'll delve into some of the other advantages as we progress. Then the second aspect was private sales that were in which was subsidized. They had a subsidy that accrued to the size of the system. There were about 2 main types of systems: the lanterns, which were 10 watt peak, and the solar home systems themselves, which range between 20 and 50 watt peak as the majority. Now, what was noted was that people did want a little bit more, but what we were trying to bridge very specifically here was a genuine electrification gap, in the sense that people didn't have access to the basics first. So this project dealt with dealing with the basics. So people were, so there was a very apparent need to communicate to people adequately so that they understood what particular product we were dealing with and what we were trying to achieve in them having access to this product. So some of the things that were picked up was that you needed to give these people enough time to actually understand what they were getting into. You needed to give them, assurances. You needed to give them things in a very non-technical manner, that they understood that, okay, this is what this can and this is what this can't do. So you needed to kill a lot of them, the myths and misinformation about the actual products and the sector that we're dealing with under this project. And one of the things was that because it was relatively, not relatively new per se, but you're dealing with a territory where there was already some degree of apathy, you really needed to gain the consumer's trust. And that really meant that you needed to be very open with them and try to understand their problem and treat each respective client slightly differently, because they would all understand their problems quite differently. So in achieving some of this, what we did was we tried to be very clear in everything. So if a customer, for example, said, well, why do I need a solar home system that has a charge controller in it? Why can't I just connect it directly to the battery, as is seen in many rural setups? This was explained to them that the methods that you were going about things were not correct. And by effectively communicating with them on a consistent basis, we ended up having less issues with products, meaning that the customer knew what to do from the start. And this really meant that they were able to also effectively also communicate within their own communities as to how to deal with the products. And this reduced a lot of burden on the actual products and allowed them to stand the test of time. We also allowed the technical teams and the sales teams to put the products together themselves. That meant that the product would be imported and then assembled locally. So the sales team were involved in the actual assembly. So they knew what each component was and how it functioned. And they were also able to make various iterations in terms of how they could go about doing the installations that could make it easier for themselves and also easier for the beneficiary. So in discussing the level of value or the effectivity of the communication, we were able to optimize or take very little energy because these 10 watt to 50 watt peak systems are quite small. But when you start teaching people how to use lighting as and when it's needed, they quickly also understand that, well, I don't need to have the light burning at 5 p.m. in the evening. I might as well do it at maybe 6 or 7 p.m. when it actually goes dark, so that my battery lasts longer. Also, so that the little energy that I have goes further. And this is quite helpful from a communications perspective. Also, the fact that we were using LEDs as part of the design was equally helpful because they quickly understood that not only was it brighter than a candle, it was also significantly cheaper. Some of the results of that were that we had at some points the product being the demand, we could not fulfill the demand, and in certain cases ended up actually overachieving on certain targets. So specifically, what we are up to now as a result of some of the lessons that were learned is that we have, in January of this year, we issued out an EOI relating to the off-grid space, specifically the solar home system space. We did have an equivalent for mini grids, but that will not really be discussed in this particular meeting. So one of the things was that from various interactions and monitoring the space, it was definitely a market thing to have a lot of government participation, not only from the policy perspective, but also from the financing perspective. And it was noted that bringing in certain subsidies did help boost the space because the cost of doing electrification using other methods, this is slightly cheaper and more cost effective to an extent when you want to meet your electrification targets from a basic perspective. And I'll repeat that. From a basic perspective, going down the solar home system route, you will achieve what you, in a very short space of time, a relatively large number of connections in relative comparison to other technologies. And the fact that our population settlements in Zambia are relatively scattered, especially in the rural areas. I can relate to Southern Province, for example. You will find that population densities there are quite low and that households are quite spread out. And that disadvantages other technologies. There will be the obvious downside to the fact that the product may not meet the objective of other productive uses, for the simple reason that the capital cost when going into solar home systems that are able to undertake larger productive uses are quite expensive. So one of the other things in relating to the EOIs and the submissions, was that we are currently still reviewing some of the EOIs, and successful applicants will be approached for proposals. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Montanga. Thank you very much, Mr. Montanga.
Thank you.
I now would like to proceed to look at some of the questions that we have received. And these questions are directed at all the three panelists. May I just kindly confirm once more, Mr. Mainza and Mr. Mwewa, are we both still online so that we can proceed with the questions?
Yes, I'm on.
Yes, we're on.
Thank you very much, participants, also for the questions that you have sent on the chat section. And also for those that still have questions, we will come back to you. There are questions that were directed at Mr. Mainza. I will proceed straight to those questions, and after which I will ask the next questions on the chat, which are directed at Mr. Mwewa before going to Mr. Montanga. The first question, I think, goes to Mr. Mainza. What plans have been laid down in terms of sensitizations for the general public on solar energy in Zambia? That was the first question. That goes on to Mr. Mainza.
Okay, so this is on sensitization. So for a long time, we have been doing what we call the Energy Week. So we have a certain dates in which we talk about alternative renewable energy sources, and also we talk about energy efficient strategies. So within that week, we have got radio interviews, we have road shows, we have a lot of activities that we do. We haven't been able to do these activities, I think, for the past 2 years, but they are in our plans this year, and I hope COVID will not prevent those activities. So what we really do is some of the activities we really do is go out there, choose a certain place, area, mount a tent, have all these banners from a lot of people, from a lot of companies. So we have RIA, Energy Regulation Board, and private sector. Muhanya has been with us for a long time. So we would sensitize people on efficient cooking, for instance. They should not use the ordinary braziers, the traditional ordinary braziers with a lot of holes because they waste charcoal. So we'll show them the efficient ones. Actually, some of the companies will even come and sell. So we'll be with ZESCO telling them the efficient bulbs and how they benefit by using those, perhaps even exchanging those incandescent bulbs for energy efficient bulbs. They have this process, but that was one of the forums they would use. So it would be a lot of sensitization, and we had actually started expanding it. So we did it in Southern Province, we did it in Eastern Province, we also went to Northern Province, and we had plans to expand it further. So we'll see what we do this year regarding the same issue, Energy Week.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mainza. Thank you, Mr. Mainza. I will now go to Mr. Mwewa for 2 questions from the chat section. What are the most effective ways of boosting demand for solar? So it is cost effective. So is it cost effective for developers cooking? Then the next question is, what are some of the ways in which private sector resources can be used to supplement public initiatives? These questions are meant for Mr. Mwewa. Over to you, sir.
Okay, if I may start with the second question, some of the ways that I was trying to write down the question. Can you please repeat the question again?
The last question is, what are some of the ways in which private sector resources can be used supplement public initiatives?
Okay. All right. On that question, what I may say is we have seen from the past that the private sector has been involved in various projects. If I may take an example is Mohanya Solar that developed Cinder mini grid some time back. Mohanya Solar has proven to have a technical capability of actually putting up some of these installations. And I think that's one of the ways that they can provide resources when it comes to the technical aspect of implementing such kind of projects. Also, the private sector has the ability to actually bring in resources and obviously put up viable project proposals that may attract funding for business models that may seem to be difficult in places where it may seem to be, like for example, Sunny Money, where they are reaching communities that are far off the grid. So I feel with that kind of with those kind of resources, the private sector is able actually to help bring in the initiatives in line with the national initiatives to actually increase access energy for all. I don't know if that answers the question. The other one was
the other one was what are the most effective ways of boosting demand for solar? So it is cost effective for developers. Are we able to undertake activities like cooking?
Of course, we were able to do that. We've seen some projects have come online where certain international communities have actually brought in cooking initiatives. An example is Vitalite. When it comes to boosting demand for solar, I feel it's a game for everyone to actually be involved, be it cooperating partners, the public, as well as the private sector. But in our case, demand can only be achieved if we show value of what it can provide when it comes to energy. And in the recent past, I'm sure we've seen how that solar is now, everyone is talking about it, obviously with the calamity that was that we had sometime back 2015, 2016, where we had rampant load shedding. A lot of people came in and started inquiring about what solar is. As a result, that created demand. But to sustain that demand, obviously, we need people that are able to actually explain, people that are able to provide technical assistance, like Mr. Montanga was actually explaining earlier. We need some of these technical aspects of solar to be explained so that it can be made simple to a layman. If it's made simple, I'm sure people will understand, and when they understand, they'll be able to actually buy into the idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mwewa. I will move to the next two questions quickly before I can come to the participants online to also give us their comments. Two questions, for Mr. Montanga. Mr. Montanga, are you there?
Please go ahead.
The first question is, the REMP has identified rural growth centers. How does the REMP specifically integrate private sector or donor-driven electrification initiatives with focus on rural growth centers to be electrified and grid expansion projects, especially even also those that are being done by ZESCO? How does the private sector come in relation to the RGCs that have been identified in the REMP? That's the first question. And the second one is, how do you ensure customers, especially in remote areas, are able to exercise their customer rights? For example, when they receive 40 products, is there a cooperation or approaches between SIAs and government that ensure that customers' rights are protected or to a larger extent? Thank you, Mr. Mutanga.
Thank you very much. Right. So both are very loaded questions, but let's try and work with the first question first. Essentially, when we look at the RGCs and how they are set out, we are very alive to the fact that the RGCs are, a moving target. They do change with time. So when you look at things like electrification initiatives, as the private sector or as rather cooperating partners come into the space, if there is a lack of coordination at the very beginning, there is a problem. But generally speaking, if there is coordination at the very beginning, when the private sector actually or the cooperating partners do show intent to participate in the development of these RGCs, usually we are able to spell out how we can go about doing this. For example, the private sector could come into the Rural Electrification Authority and say that they are looking for a particular site in which they want to undertake certain development, and they could have a criteria. And one of the things that we would actually do is we would try and look within our database amongst the RGCs of space that may not be developed and may fit their criteria. So the other thing is that because we have certain data in relation to how certain projects sit, i.e. the proximity to the grid, and the proximity to, let's say, the nearest tapping point on the grid, what type of infrastructure may be there, we can give some guidance. And what typically happens is that we are able to now not step on each other's toes when we actually want to go down a developmental path. For example, if RIA did have intentions to develop a certain area under a certain project, we may actually consider offloading that project to the private sector in view that they are partners in development. I hope that answers that question. And then in relation to the second question, this is, I think this is a bit of a gray space for the simple reason that the consumers ideally should be protected by CCPC, which is your Consumer Protection Authority in Zambia. So it still can be a little bit difficult addressing this very directly, but there are certain requirements for projects like that we are intending to undertake, as I had been mentioned. As I had mentioned in my presentation, where one of the requirements is that any one of the successful applicants who actually does come to the table to undertake this project would be held to account quite literally for their participation and as well as their commitment to the customer in terms of bringing the product to give the customer the required results. So in the event that the product did end up faulty, I think the customer would be fully inclined to all the terms and conditions that lay forth in the warranty and the guarantees of the product. I think also another thing that we are trying to follow is also what is known as the extended producer responsibility, meaning that the actual solar home system provider has to think about the product beyond its end of life. So we are trying to look at how we can effectively help manage the space. But as I did mention in my initial remark, it is quite a gray space. So it is something that we would have to, still tweak as the projects progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muntanga. I first want to acknowledge the questions that came from Dr. Suzanne and also Martin, and also Gordon for the questions that I raised earlier. There is one question for Mr. Mainza. After Mr. Mainza responds to this question, I would also kindly ask those that would like to ask the questions and are not able to type the questions on the chat section to please just raise your hand. We'll be able to notice and pick your question. Victor is also going to assist me if I'm not able to notice people with their hands raised. At this point, I will go to Mr. Mainza. There's a question that says, does the Ministry of Energy do you develop any deliberate policy to allow local players to fully participate in a utility scale project, as the case with the Road Development Agency? That's for Mr. Mainza.
Yeah, thanks so much, moderator. Yes, we do. Actually, we grant feasibility study rights for developers who want to put up solar power plants, and there are quite so many right now who applied. And what we do is we support them through the process until they go to ZESCO and engage ZESCO for a power purchase agreement. Of course, the process that we do here is not automatic that when you go to ZESCO, a power purchase agreement will be signed. But we carry out the whole process here, help you identify a place and tell you there's no any other developer and so on. By the time you go to ZESCO, at least you would have cleared out many of the issues. But ZESCO has its own authority to either agree or disagree with maybe the tariff or many other factors that may accompany the project. So yes, we actually encourage private sector participation in the development of utility scale solar energy. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Mainza. Victor, we seem to have, do we seem to have any people with their hands?
Yes, we have 3 people with actually 4 people with their hands up. I think Emma Kaluba was the first one. So we will give an opportunity to Emma, and then Nelson, and after that we'll have Yvonne. So they can ask their questions to the specific people, and then those people will respond based on the order of the questions. So
thank
Emma.
you.
Thank you very much. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Yes, please.
So I actually have perhaps 1 or 2 comments more than questions based on what has already been asked. Is that all right?
Go ahead.
So basically just looking at some of the questions that were asked, I just thought it might be helpful to add a few points coming from the perspective of also having worked in the solar industry for a while. And I really appreciated the presentation by REA. I thought it was quite accurate and representative of the current situation. So I think regarding certain sensitization activities, I was firstly curious as to how often the Energy Week happens, but also wanted to state that considering how many solar companies that there currently are, and the type of reach that they have in terms of their operations. Many of these companies, in my understanding, usually have programs that require them to be out in the field. So they have access usually to a significant number of the provinces regularly. And based on the Energy Week and those activities that are occurring, it would probably be quite beneficial for those companies to continue on with the sensitization process, because I can imagine that if something is happening once or twice, perhaps, let's say in the year, that the information or that process is lost, and it's something that has to be continuous and regularly done throughout the year to actually be effective. And I think just moving on to one of the questions that Martin Price had asked in terms of increasing demand, something that I personally have noticed is that one of the struggles within the solar sector is the lack of standardized and quality solar equipment that comes into Zambia. And basically what that does is it puts a damper on the whole market because people buy the cheaper equipment on the assumption that it'll actually be as valuable as the quality equipment that usually goes through some form of a regulatory process. So trying to actually ensure that the products that are coming into the country are of high standard, and therefore there is actually more value perceived by the customer. And this would also go into consideration with sensitizing the customers to make sure that they are aware of what type of products to look for so that they know that they are getting value for their money. And I think another aspect which had already been mentioned is looking at the overall cost of things like importation, VAT, and the taxes that are on the product. So I think from the beginning of, let's say, 2020 or 2019, simply because of, unfortunately, the depreciation of the kwacha, most of the solar products have, in many cases, increased, whether it's by 50% or 100%. And if you're looking at things like light libraries, where within rural communities, people are supposed to be able to afford 1 or 2 kwacha a day to rent out a light, and they can't even afford that when the cost of equipment skyrockets by almost 50 to 100%. Despite the fact that there is a demand, it's just not affordable. And I do think that there is the demand, actually, it definitely exists, but it's also the affordability of the good quality products that becomes difficult. And I think the last thing that I had wanted to mention, just regarding one of the questions, let me just see if I can find it in the chat, by Suzanne, about making sure that consumers have access to their rights. Just to add on to what Montanga said, this has been very, very difficult. So I previously was working with Sunny Money, and something that we had found is that even if the products go out into the field, into the rural communities, and there is a very serious lack of qualified technicians that actually know how to handle solar products. And because these individuals, the consumers, live so far away from where most of the bases of these companies are, they will try to go and get their products fixed or fix them themselves, noting that it might be a long time since they are able to go to main towns, whether it's in Lusaka or the Copper Belt. And their warranty almost immediately becomes void, because the minute someone else tampers with that product that is not the company that you have bought it from, your warranty is void. And then that is another cost on the companies, on the consumers. So trying to have certain refurbishment and refurbishment and renewal programs in place, basically to try and extend the longevity of the life of these products, and that your field staff is able to try and implement those when they go out, has been something Sunny Money has actually found beneficial. They had done a pilot project on it for about a year to actually see if this is something that would work, but it definitely is difficult without the technical staff.
Sorry, Emma, we are running out of time, so I think we'll let you finish so that others can ask questions, because we only have about half an hour.
I'm actually done. That was my last comment.
Thanks, Emma. So can we have the next question? Mr. Msonda.
Good morning. My name is Nelson Msonda. I must declare interest that I'm coming from the Rural Electrification Authority, and I just want to amplify what my colleague Engineer Montanga responded to question that came from Dr. Suzanne. And I think the question was bordering on a coordination in the off-grid space and in principle even the on-grid. I think the question was related to the ramp and how the private sector donor initiatives are collaborated or identified. I want to, in the first place, mention that I think Rural Electrification Authority exists under the Ministry of Energy. And so most of the entry point for most of the donors, private sector usually they go through the Ministry of Energy. And then they are actually given the go-ahead if there's any site that they would like to work on. But in principle, the Rural Electrification Program is driven by RIA through the mandate that was given in 2003. What we have noticed in the past years is that it has been very difficult to collaborate some of the efforts from the donors and the private sector because some of them, they don't go through RIA, being the overseer of rural education. So in principle, you find that there are so many actors that maybe RIA is not even aware about. And so it becomes very difficult for us to appreciate how much effort is going into the off-grid space if this is not well coordinated. I'm glad to mention that under the Electricity Service Access Project, ESAP, and particularly under the DOE, there is now an initiative to work out
Hello, Victor. We seem to have lost Mr.
a strategy that. Sorry, I think I was just being disturbed by a call. So I was stating that we have the Rural Electrification Authority being the overseer of the electrification activities and given the mandate by law. However, there is no restriction of any other players going into the electrification space and do what lacks is a systematic coordination effort. And so I was just saying that under the project and working with the Department of Energy, we have a strategy that is being developed that will make sure that there's well-established linkages on efforts of rural electrification so that we know who is doing what in this area. Currently, that is not there. But I also wanted just to use this opportunity to state that under the ESAP, which is a project under Rural Electrification Authority, ZESCO, and DOE, we also have an opportunity. And let me mention also that we have DBZ, Development Bank of Zambia, part of the ESAP. And we do have a deliberate program where the private sector and the companies that are dealing in solar products that do not have the capacity and would like to be assisted will be given an opportunity to get a loan. Of course, this will be a revolving fund through a commercial bank, and then be able to make sure that we give capacity to the players who do not have financial resources to deal with large-scale rural electrification, especially focusing on solar products. So, moderator, I think that was my contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Msonda.
Yes, we have Yvonne, and then after Yvonne, we'll have the prof go as the last question.
Well, mine is just a quick question. Has the Ministry of Energy come up with rates for renewable energy?
Mr. Mainza, are you online? Mr. Mainza? Yvonne, kindly.
Yes, I'm online. Hello?
There is a question from Yvonne. Could you kindly repeat the question, Yvonne?
I was asking if the Ministry of Energy has come up with renewable energy rates.
Thank you very much.
You mean the feed-in tariffs?
Yes.
I must assume.
Yes.
Okay. So through the we had a project called the Renewable Energy Feed-in Tariff. Actually, we called it a strategy. So under this one, we had the policy side as well as the mechanism side. So the mechanism was being done by the Energy Regulation Board, while we did the policy side. So in the mechanism, there were some solar tariffs, which were put at that time to indicate that this would be a good tariff for somebody to get a return on the investment. But the challenge that was there was that the ZESCO tariff was quite low. So with that tariff, you cannot sign a power purchase agreement with ZESCO. Or if you are operating as an off-grid system, it's very easy for customers to switch to the other one. That's why there's a need for grid encroachment regulation on that one. I think with the ERB, we are in discussion with that one. So there was, yes, the tariffs that were developed for wind as well as for solar, but at that time they were quite too high for them to be implemented. So they did not succeed.
Thank you, Mr. Mainza.
So in a sense, there's what about a situation where you set up a grid somewhere in the rural, and then how do you charge the end users?
Yeah, for that one, you have to apply for the power purchase agreement that you have with the customers needs to be approved by the Energy Regulation Board. So the ERB sees to it that the tariffs that you are applying to the customers seems fair, and also the customers are agreeable to the tariff that you have. So that should there be any breach of the contract in that power purchase agreement you have, then the regulator will come in and protect, the consumer. Or if the consumer is being unfair to the developer, they also come in to protect the developer. So there is a strong regulation on that one. The power purchase agreement must be approved by the ERB. So whatever price you agree, it doesn't have to be cheaper than the ZESCO or whatever. So you just have to agree that I think this is a fair price, and you can go ahead. Actually, most of the tariffs that are out there for mini grids are more than the ones being offered by the utility company.
Thank you, Mr. Mainza.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Moderator, can I make a comment on one of the submissions that were made on the quality standards and capacity building?
Sure, you can please go ahead, Mr. Mainza. Please make it brief. We're running out of time.
Okay, thank you. So there was an observation that the quality standards, that the products that are coming are actually of poor quality, which is very true. So we are doing something about it as ministry, of course, with the support from ESTAF and ERB as well as Zambia Bureau of Standards, to develop the standards for solar and so on. But so far, we've developed the standards for quite a number of solar components, like the battery, the solar module, the mini grids, and so on. But the challenge that we have now is that these standards are not mandatory. They are still, standards that somebody has just make reference to, but not necessarily, if you do not abide to these standards, you cannot be arrested or prosecuted or so on. So we want to make these standards mandatory under this project, at least for solar mini grids, for solar home systems, so that whoever is bringing up those solar kits, at least they must be in accordance with the standards that we have. So this will assist us to have products that can compete. I think, like you mentioned on the person who commented, it's very difficult to compete with substandard products because, of course, they'll be very cheap, but you're bringing in quality products, but people look at the cost. The second one is on capacity building. Also rightly observed, there is a lot of capacity that is required in the installation of these solar products. I think for many people who live in urban areas, we've seen that the orientation of these solar panels, now that a lot of people are buying them, is totally, most of them is totally wrong. You know, for half of the day, the solar panel or the solar geyser that you have is in the shade. So it's because of the people who are making these installations do not have information on what actually needs to be done. Most of them are electrical technicians, and they think just maybe connections are enough, but the orientation issues when it comes to solar. So there's a need for capacity building. And we're also doing something about it with KGRTC, Kafue Gorge Regional Training Center. There's also capacity building that is there under the ESTAF project, this one, and quite a number of other projects to assist our technicians to develop skills. Also, the University of Zambia, we gave an input to the development of the curriculum at TEVETA or for technicians to observe these installation of solar equipment. So the observations were very accurate, and the ministry is doing about it. Of course, we've not reached a certain stage, but I think we shall start seeing the benefits in a few years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mainza. Victor, do we still have any hands and further questions?
Yes, we do. I think the Prof. Prem, you can ask your question, and then Thomas, you will ask yours after the Prof.
Okay, thank you. First, three quick requests, which I already made, but I can repeat. If these presentations are very good, if you can please share it with the participants, I will be grateful. Then I would like to have contact for Mr. Mueva from SIAS. I want to talk to him about something. And then if Mr. Mueva can also send the contact list of the SIAS members. So these are three requests. Then my questions. First question is for Mr. Mainza. He has given some useful figures of national electrification 31.2 and urban 67.2, and then 4.4% grid and 7.4% off grid. So I would like to know an authentic source, because sometimes we often find these are different figures at different places, because whenever we write papers or project proposals, it is important to give authentic figures. So if Mr. Mainza can provide an authentic source from where these figures can be taken up. Then the second question is same to Mr. Mainza. Mr. Mainza, that he said 3% contribution to the national grid of solar energy. Now this 3% contribution comes from the on-grid only, because on-grid we 88 megawatt, which makes 3%. So the 3% doesn't contain off-grid. So should we not mention this contribution of solar including the off-grid? Then it might go to 5% or 6% or something like that. Then my question is to Mr. Mueva from SIAS. About the costing. We understand. I'm in solar for a long time, many decades, and I understand the importance of off-grid. But all these off-grid systems, the cost comes out to be somewhere around 30 cents, 40 cents, 50 cents per kilowatt hour, which is much more than the tariffs in the urban areas. So that is also a big problem. Now, on the other hand, we say we have hydro potential to be 6,000 megawatt. So as I said, although I am solar enthusiast, but has there been any study trying to see that if we have grid and distribution network, how much is that going to cost compared to solar? Although we say it's going to cost very high, and I understand distribution network is very costly. But at present, at least, solar is also coming out fairly costly for the rural people, 30 to 50 cents. So There should be some kind of study. I don't know whether it will be covered under cost of service study or there needs to be a separate study. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mainza and Mr. Mwewa. Could you kindly share the questions? Thank you. Starting with Mr. Mainza.
Okay, thank you. So, Prof, the document which we are relying on is a 2015 report on the living conditions and monitoring survey, which was done by the Central Statistics. There's an office at Central Statistical Office which did this document. So, it's the one that we are relying on. Of course, there are some documents which have come up, and they have some different figures of connection rates, but we don't take them as authentic until we have a discussion with stakeholders like yourselves and others to see what parameters they use to come up with those figures. Because sometimes when it's not the people that are energy experts, conducting this survey, immediately they see the panel, they start recording that, no, these people are connected, these people. So there's need to understand that before we can adopt those statistics. Coming to the contribution of solar to the national energy grid, it's just that the 88 megawatts is giving a very big contribution, which is about 2.95. So the rest of the contributions are actually 0.05. Before we had these the utility scale solar grids, we were actually reporting 0.05 as a connection rate. But of course, these figures are bound for verification because there's a lot of solar installations going on, especially by the private sector, which needs to be, accounted for. But it's a task that we have as a Ministry and Rural Electrification to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mwewa.
Thank you. May I kindly ask Professor to ask the question again?
The question is that on the costing of solar energy for off-grid systems versus the cost of electrification through normal hydropower and extension of the grid, etc. As I said, I'm solar enthusiast and I would love to see solar energy in the far-off areas, but so at least as at present, the off-grid electricity also comes at quite a high cost, which comes out to be somewhere in the region of 30 cents to 40 or 50 cents, which is very high compared to the grid electricity which we get in the cities, which is roughly around maybe about 10, less than, now it is only 5 cents, 5-6 cents, somewhere around. So is there any study which can really give the cost of extending hydropower, say, to the whole of Zambia? Of course, we always say the cost of distribution is very high, but there should be a proper study if we electrify most of Zambia using the hydro, since we have a hydro potential of 6,000 megawatt, and then compare it with the cost of electrification using solar off-grid systems. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I have Mr. Kaila. I think he will take that question on.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mwewa. I think for off-grid connection, if you look at solar, there are many ways to connect rural households. There are standalone systems that are right at the user's home, or via a mini grid from a central location, from a generating unit, and then we have a distribution network. So information is available. Of course, it may vary from developer to developer, but we are looking at between $200 to $400 per connection to establish a connection from the mini grid to the home. That includes the line, the service cable, the ready board, and internal wiring. So the range is about $200 to $500 dollars per connection. Thank you.
No, but sorry, but I'm talking of not the per connection. I'm even ignoring these costs. What I'm talking is the per kilowatt hour. Once you have made all the connections and you supply the electricity, then per kilowatt hour cost comes out to be somewhere around 30, 40, 50 US cents per kilowatt hour, which is much, much costlier than the cost of electricity which comes from the grid to my house, which is somewhere around 5 cents.
Okay, so the comparison, yes, is correct. So the range is probably even higher. It could be from 30 cents to $3. That could be the tariff. It's $3 per kilowatt hour. I've seen those tariffs on several mini grids, particularly in East Africa. Here in Zambia, most mini grids are donor driven. So donors give grants. So the tariff for most mini grids in this country are subsidized. So I don't think there's a developer right now in Zambia using private money or borrowed money to develop a mini grid and then set a tariff. Of course, it will be very high. We did set up a mini grid 3 years ago, and we have a tariff that is very competitive, and I think we are charging something in the range of 10 cents per kilowatt hour, which is probably similar to what ZESCO is charging, because it's a subsidized tariff. If it was private money, certainly the tariff would be much higher. And we did work out using the tariff model that the tariff, if it was private money, would have been around $2 to $3 per kilowatt hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaira. Victor, are we able to just take one more question, then we wrap up our webinar this morning?
Yeah, we are able to take a question. Now, the challenge is we have 2 people left. Okay. So what I would say is for the 2 of you, Thomas Chifuka and Chibuikem, if you can ask your question, both of you at the same, both of you following each other for a minute each, because we have run out of time. We have 4 minutes and we have to get the closing remarks before we end the webinar. So Thomas Chifuka, you go first, and then Chibuikem, you will ask your question after that. Make them as short as possible. After that, ladies and gentlemen, we will not have any further questions. For any questions that you have, just write them on the chat section and we will make sure they get to the speakers.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, yes, it's Thomas Fuka. Yeah, let me be very quick. I'm in a district which was recently connected by the Rural Electrification Authority, and I just wanted to find out what are the steps one needs to take if you want to be connected to maybe a household or any facility from the main line. I wanted to get an indication of the cost implications and what you need to do over that. Secondly, I would want to find out what are the alternatives in terms of solar energy systems that can be used to power up a small facility. I would appreciate if I can just be given maybe some cost implications or some companies, private companies that you can highlight that we can easily contact and get some cost implications from them. I think that is all from me.
Thank you, Thomas. Are you able to type your number on the chat section so that we can come to you on the questions? Your questions are very, very specific to your need. Thank you. Maybe we can move to the next question.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much. So quickly, I was just wanted to know if REA engages with the REAs, that's REA Zambia engages with the other REAs in the regions, and if so, how that engagement works. We just want to know about coordination within the region, government to government. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Muntanga, are you able to talk about the engagement of other rural electrification agencies in the region?
Thank you very much. I'll very quickly go over that. So as a Rural Electrification Authority, one of the things that we do undertake engagements with other electrification authorities within the region. We also are members of groups such as Club ER. We do have interactions on various platforms. So yes, we do coordinate with them. We also are a member of APUA, or we do undertake collaborations with APUA as well, and their members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muntanga. At this point, I would like to warmly thank everybody that has participated in this webinar. I will now invite Mr. Mukosa to close this webinar for us. Thank you. Mr. Mukosa, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chorwe. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Like I said in the opening remarks, that as a way forward now, our role will be to advance the cause of advocacy on off-grid solar solutions. Just yesterday, as senior management, we were looking at the findings of the Auditor General's report on the promotion of renewable energy sources in rural areas in Zambia. And that report was produced last year. Of the key findings was that in the report was that the issue of the low levels of awareness on renewable energy, and specifically on solar technologies. Now, you can see that and the Committee on Energy and Water Development and Tourism actually has requested that we put in place certain strategies to identify certain obstacles that relate to off-grid solar solution challenges. So we can see that this discussion that we've had today is not only a discussion at institutional or sector level, but it's also a discussion that is at national level. So we see such discussion platforms as we've had today, and obviously the outcome of the whole process of coming up with a strategy as probably an effective avenue of addressing certain key issues. I want to mention here that from the discussion, one point of learning is that off-grid solar solutions adopted by REA should be supported by the issue of energy efficient also strategies that should ensure maybe the sustainability of our solar products. That's one thing that has come to the fore in this discussion. There is therefore a strong discussion and process of coming up with an energy efficient concept that should be deployed alongside with key issues that have been presented in today's presentations. This energy efficiency measures notes that we are developing will be able to talk to issues such as those that have been indicated, like pre-project energy requirements, issues of energy audits, issues of house market transformations, issues of financing mechanism for appliances, etc., etc. We feel that these discussions and the strategy being advanced through this exercise will actually, to a huge extent, induce a more focused approach to addressing the common challenges that relate to off-grid solar solutions. May I just maybe finally end by saying that this has been in our discussion, our conversation with Madam Bwalia, that the issue of resource mobilization to implement crucial actions been posed through discussions such as this webinar, and that we believe that will ultimately come through the final strategy document. looking at the trends of the funding investment by government into the rural electrification space, this is a reality. I think it's a homework that needs to be addressed. Although we might be optimistic that opportunities such as the ones that will come, that we've had today, I think somehow opportunities will open up. Let me just say, in the interest of time, let me just thank everyone who has been in attendance at this meeting, both the facilitators and the participants. On behalf of RIA, I want to wish you a good day for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you very much, Mr. Mkosa. And ladies and gentlemen, we end our webinar for this morning. Thank you very much for those that joined us and those that sent questions. Let's have a blessed day. Thank you so much to the entire team that worked to make sure that this event is a success, the A staff team, and also the team from the Rural Electrification Authority. Thank you and bye for now.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh dear.